Awesome. All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone to Sport Tech Daily's episode with Ed Bayliss. He's a cricket analyst from over the UK. As you'll go into, it is mainly a passion of his, but he's been doing it for a while. So, look, thanks for coming on, Ed, and nice to meet you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No worries. So, look, we'll get straight into it, and we'll start off with yourself. Tell us a bit about your background, your education, and what you're doing now.
Sure. So, did a physics degree, finished that, got an accountancy qualification. Then I went into banking, did that for a few years. Now I work in retail as a finance analyst, and I also do the blogging at redballdata.com on the side.
Nice. All right. So, how long has the journey been to get into sport analytics? How long have you been doing it for?
Well, it's a funny one. So I created a model for test matches in about 2011. So that's been running a very long time, but actually for ages, only now do I realize I didn't really do anything with it. So for like 7 or 8 years, it was like the Monty Panesar who'd played one test 50 times. So I was just doing the same thing, not learning. And I do a bit of gambling as well. So kind of learned from that along the way that the market caught up and then overtook me. So then in the last couple of years, it's really kind of picked up. Was it December 2018? I think I started the site and went, okay, let's get properly into this. Let's learn something new. And that's been where it's really got interesting.
Right, awesome. And how's the role of analytics in cricket evolved during the time that you've been following it, say across the last decade or so?
I can see where others have caught up and then outpaced. So see examples like you follow maybe Cricket Viz at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the early days they were putting the odd message out there, and I was thinking that's it's interesting, but maybe their WinViz model, for instance, started out and you could look at it and go, that's not that well calibrated, maybe.
Yeah.
But then you could just see it get better and better with each iteration, and now it's just not going to be able to compete with that.
Right. Okay. How long? So how long have you been going with Red? Well, not just the blog Red Ball Data, but you said it was about 9 or 10 years ago that you started with your own cricket analysis.
Yeah, that's right. So as soon as I realised I could, I had a crack at building something, and actually it came out all right. And way back then, I think that might have been maybe somewhere near cutting edge. I'm not sure that many models for test matches existed then, but I only found that out later, that maybe had an opportunity to do something which I didn't know what I had on my hands, if you know what I mean.
Right. Okay. Well, look, for some of us that are very big sporting fans, and especially, I personally absolutely love cricket. Which areas of cricket do you focus on?
Well, as part of realizing just how far cricket analysis has come, started to sort of look at it and go, I probably need some kind of niche, because I'm not going to be able to cover everything. And stuff like 2020, there's so many really good analysts out there that leave it to the pros. So the niche and the bits that I'm really interested in, clearly given the Red Ball Data website, it's the Red Ball stuff. So test matches, as well as so far it's only domestic cricket, so the county stuff in England. Might try and expand that to the other Red Ball regions, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And what are some of the most interesting insights you've come across during your analysis?
One that really surprised me was how batsmen play themselves in. So I had in my head that Test cricket, someone plays themselves in until they've got maybe 20 runs, so that's sort of 6 or 7 overs.
Right.
But then getting deep into that analysis and saying, how does it work for one-day cricket, and then how does it work for 2020? And going, oh, these curves actually look really, really similar in all 3 formats. There's kind of a steep playing yourselves in for the first 20 balls, and then you're up and running. And I just didn't expect them to look so similar, because they're such different events.
Right. Okay. And it's interesting, as a part of Sport Tech Daily, I've been speaking to people in, a lot of armchair analysts that follow different sports like rugby league, AFL, cricket, etc. And I guess I've read a few articles recently at the AFL data community and complaining a lot about how they don't release the data, so that a lot of armchair analysts can essentially go for it and be quite innovative. How do you find the access to data within cricket?
So there's some really good stuff that Cricinfo have got, and that's kind of my go-to source for pretty much everything. One
Right.
of the gaps is that it doesn't cover ball by ball. So there's a couple of other sources out there, but really, if you want to do the serious analysis, you probably need to build your own database. So that's something I might be finding myself doing again in the next couple of months, just to keep up with everybody else.
Right. Okay. Well, that kind of brings me to the question I was going to ask you around, which tools have you used and what modeling or analysis methods, I guess, have you used or are you keen to learn?
Yeah, and that's where I'm not a statistician, though I probably maybe try and sound like one, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean, without being a fraud. So there's techniques that I've picked up from 4 years of physics. How many years of banking? Don't know, 6, we'll say. And just finding the right tool to apply in a given situation to answer a question. It's probably not rigorous, and I'm never going to be writing any academic papers or getting a doctorate in this stuff. But
Yeah.
it's like it's right enough. So that probably doesn't really answer your question. What tools do I apply? Basically, it's just Excel.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
it's kind of doing what I can with what I've got as a very, very enthusiastic hobbyist.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's something that I've stressed with anyone that I've spoken to at Sport Tech Daily. As a part of this site and this project, I've spoken to people that have PhDs and are using every tool imaginable and studied this for maybe 10 years. But then a lot of the people that I speak to, the purpose of the site is to give power to I keep referring to it as armchair analysts. I just really like that term, but essentially people that are fans of sport have started dabbling with Excel or whatever other, I guess, data analysis tool, and want to get into their own insight. So I believe that you should be able to be on a platform like that, and especially in Australia where we're quite far behind the US and most probably parts of Europe as well in terms of our sporting analysis. I think it's a really good starting point to see, while we're early in our, I guess, maturity, how innovative we can be, and then as we get there over the next few years, I'm sure we will in Australia as well, and in the cricketing world. I think the focus on which tools you use and what type of analysis you do will be a lot more stringent. But I think at the moment, people like you are sort of paving the way for for the uni students nowadays that are coming through. They can sort of look at your work and be inspired by that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think as it matures, there'll be less scope for people in my position. That's why it's almost one of the things that spurs me on. Like,
Yeah.
better crack on and do this analysis now, because if not, things are accelerating very, very quickly.
Right. No, that's definitely true. So in terms of places to find cricket data, you mentioned Cricinfo was one of the big ones. Have you had a look into T20 cricket at all, and where sort of data for that is mainly located?
I've dabbled, so it's still there in Cricinfo, just not ball by ball. There
Right.
are other sites out there, so I think it's CricSheet has got a lot of data there, just not something I've ever mined myself.
Right, fair enough. And look, coronavirus, COVID. I think it's a topic on everyone's mind at the moment. How do you think it'll impact the cricketing landscape, A, in the UK and B, globally?
Yeah, it's a professional sport now, so that money talks, and that money needs to come from somewhere. So what will we see in the short term? Well, nothing's going to happen in the short term. Then when things get back up and running, particularly in the UK, we're probably going to miss most of this season, if not all
Yeah.
of it. So what happens? Well, there's a lot of talk about what happens when we restart, and it's probably not test matches, almost certainly not the county championship this year. What does that mean? Well, it means the shortest form. So it means T20s get us back up and running. And the way I see it, we're going to be accelerating trends that would be happening anyway. So, right across life, things become more digital, for instance, and the
Yeah.
equivalent in cricket will be a lot more 2020. And it's going to feel really strange maybe because it takes time to organise a test match, when those finally drop into the schedule. So I think that swing from red to white ball, we'll just see that a lot faster.
Right. Because I know in the Australian sporting landscape, they're discussing exactly that. How's sport going to look when we recommence? Especially what's going to be. I think even in the market generally, what people are saying, because I guess this will teach us to become more lean and become more efficient. Is the next sort of 6 to 9 months going to have an impact on the next 2, 5, 10 years? Once we know what's possible with less matches or sort of less support staff, is that just going to be a model for the next few years? Do you believe in that, or do you think we'll be able to get back to where we were pretty quickly?
Big question. Tough call. What do I think will happen next? It'll be weird. I think for a while we'll have very little or no crowds, and that'll be a bit odd. And the support staff too. I'd say I'd be surprised if teams have been playing with support staff they don't need.
Hmm.
So I would say any change would be short term.
Right. Okay. Because I know in the Australian media, and now that I think about it, that they say this in a few different sports, but especially the cricket team, whenever Australia's not doing well, the common line of, oh, you've got 11 players and you've got 20 support staff, that line always gets trotted out when Australia is losing in cricket. Um, have you heard that in the UK or anywhere else globally, that there's too much support staff in the international game now?
Yeah, there was do you remember when Sir Clive Woodward was running the British Lions
Right.
tour, and I think they had their own like spin doctor with them. So Alistair Campbell in the UK, who'd been heavily involved in politics,
Right.
and that was a tour that didn't go very well, as I recall. And I think that was one. It's where teams lose. You get that sort of question going, well, why have you got all that support staff? Clearly, if it works well,
Yeah.
then it's allowed to continue. And I think it's probably the case that teams have got the right level of support staff. It's just you've got to look at something when a team loses, and if the team's well resourced and well funded, you probably you try and find a factor.
Right. Right. Okay. No, that's definitely fair enough. And I think with coronavirus, I guess the other thing that's going to be impacted is as you were saying, potentially red ball cricket. I think this year and next year there's a T20 World Cup from memory in both years. So and from memory it's still, I think the next Ashes, is it in 2022, the next Ashes, or the end of 2021?
Is that right? I haven't looked that far ahead.
Yeah, fair enough. No, just from memory, there's a couple of big T20 tournaments, and the next sort of red ball big test series are a little while away. Do you think that could impact cricket in the UK on a larger scale? Because I know last year when I was watching the coverage for the ODI World Cup, there was a lot of talk around so many young people in the UK being inspired by the World Cup win. It was on free-to-air television. It was sort of bringing people back to cricket. Do you think how do you think the next sort of 12 months could really impact the younger population of cricketing fans in the UK?
Yeah, I think they'll be heavily influenced by what they see, and if there isn't any red ball cricket happening, which there won't, almost certainly won't be in the UK for another 15 months,
Right.
then yeah, that's got to have an impact.
Mm.
Maybe less seriously felt elsewhere in the world, where for instance, in Australia, where they've just had a cricket season, actually, what you hopefully just miss one off season, and
Yeah.
that's okay, surely. So that hopefully won't have too big of an impact.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think they were discussing in the Australian media, and look, obviously what's going on is horrible, and you wouldn't want it to happen at any time. But from a sporting and commercial point of view, the fact that it's going to cover most of the Australian winter from March to potentially September, if it had happened 6 months ago, it would have affected the Australian series versus Pakistan and New Zealand. So when you weigh them up, it would have made a big difference. But look, I think we're getting sidetracked. I think realistically, as you're saying, it'll be the prevalence of white ball cricket is only going to increase, and I think we're going to have bigger fish to fry over the next 3 to 6 months in global sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what about, I guess, data analytics within cricket? So I appreciate you're not, working in the industry, but you're obviously involved, and you sort of assume follow social media in this space. Do you think, where do you see potential areas that analytics could increase its role in cricket after we recommence?
I think in the short term, there's going to be some really interesting analysis, because players will come back off a long layoff, and some of them will do pretty badly, and some of them will do quite well. And the question that I've always wrestled with is, does form exist? And if it does, how big of a part to play does it have? And so when we're looking at players after a long layoff and they score 0.030, people will be asking, are they the same player that they were? Like Kohli being written off recently after not very many matches in New Zealand. So I expect we'll see a lot of questions on that side of things, and time will tell whether it's just form, whether it's just random small numbers. So that I think is one part of it. Otherwise, what do I think will happen? It's hard to say. I mean, analytics in cricket's just getting better and better. It's increasing exponentially, like just the quality of what you see out there on social media or what people are doing. So I think we'll see those trends continue. And it was interesting hearing you talk about kind of things behind closed doors earlier, because my expectation is that more of it will be hidden because it's so valuable. So whereas at the moment, certain groups are willing to tweet out interesting insights, well, I guess it's only free because it has value because of the interest that they get. But once they're being sort of brought into teams, those analysts, then they'll kind of go dark, as it were, and then there'll be less out there.
Right, and you mentioned CricViz before. So in the UK or on your social media, who are, I guess, the top 2 or 3 companies or individuals that you've noticed in the cricket analytics space?
It's almost like you could go through the thank yous within Cricket 2.0. That's an excellent book, and that's almost the who's who there. So Dan Weston, CricViz are right up there. There's loads. Jared Kimber is doing some really interesting stuff, and he's that great kind of link between a communicator and someone who's got that analytical mindset as well.
Right. Awesome. All right. And what about yourself? Which sports do you follow? Which teams or players are your favorite?
So beyond cricket, big Rugby Union fan. So follow Bath in the rugby. Don't know if you follow Rugby Union too much.
Not in the last decade or so. When I was growing up, I used to basically watch every single sport. But I think growing up, cricket and Australian rules football were always my favourites. And more recently, I started to follow rugby league. But how is Rugby Union doing? I guess before the coronavirus issue, how has it been doing in the UK, Rugby Union?
It's been like the Premiership's been doing really well. So like full crowds, tickets getting noticeably more expensive, which you can take as a sign that there's the demand out there. Contract with BT Sports, which was like a subscription TV service, but it came like as a bundle, almost like the way that sport has with Amazon Prime. I don't know if it's the same in Australia. So it's kind of, by doing that and going through that platform, it's been much more readily available to people, and therefore the crowds have come. So I'd say Rugby Union's been going from strength to strength.
Right. Okay. And look, I don't know how true this is, so you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But I remember reading and listening to a lot of the UK podcasts and the UK media around the Cricket World Cup last year. And I was actually in London just after the Cricket World Cup, so I was following the cricket quite closely, and they were talking a lot about the impact of cricket in the UK. I think it was just before or after the '05 Ashes. So these sort of 15 years predominantly have been on paid television, and the drop off of interest in the younger generation because of that. Is that, as a fan in the UK, what do you think? What's your opinion on that topic?
Really hard to isolate the cause and effect there. Um, it's I think it's something that all sports have seen, like at the grassroots level, that drop off in participation. It's just uh, harder to find adults that are willing to spend their whole Saturday or Sunday engaged in sport.
Yeah,
So there's some much wider societal changes there. That said, cricket does seem to have suffered quite significantly. Those participation stats don't look great. Um,
right.
and yeah, it's hard to argue that it not being on TV hasn't made a difference. Just that steady drip, drip, drip of something being there, being accessible, being visible.
Yeah.
Um, I've I just think of the example of my daughter seeing cricket on TV and just making the link between this thing that's on TV and then the thing that Daddy plays, and it somehow made it, I don't know, more real to her.
Right.
Um, I don't know whether that
I
makes
get
any
where you're
sense
coming
at all.
from. Yeah, because if if my one of my parents was playing some random water sport or some extreme sport, it's still a sport and it's something that your parents are doing, but as a child growing up, it's just some unheard of thing that you never really see or hear about anywhere else, but it's constantly on TV every weekend even. Then it's like, oh yeah, yeah, my parents do that, or my older brother or older sister, they do that, they do what's on TV. So it becomes a recognizable and potentially something to aspire to as well, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's not just me being some kind of weirdo. There's other weirdos out there as well with these pads and these bats and that weird helmet in a big bag.
Right. And one thing I was really interested in, so like in Australia, we've got different type of cricketing fans. We've got, the passionate, old school test match cricket fan that'll still, whatever happens, they'll always go to that one test at the SCG or the MCG every summer, at least for a day. It's almost part of their makeup, to do that. And then there's that new age fan that'll go to the T20 Big Bash games with their families, and potentially watch or follow some sort of cricket over the summer, the Australian summer. But there's not that many fans that'll actually follow cricket throughout the year, especially because there's Australian rules, rugby league, and sort of A League and Rugby Union to follow in the winter. It's really hard for them to keep in touch with the Australian winter, aside from probably the Ashes last year. That was absolutely riveting, and it's a horrible sort of time difference for us to follow, but I think it was captivating enough for people to follow. What about the cricket fan in the UK? Like, what have you noticed in the last, say, 10, 15 years, about just the average following of cricket, in like the water cooler conversations, basically?
Yeah, so we talked about the rise of the white ball side of things, and that's definitely from an office conversation perspective. That's where the general interest lies. So if somebody follows a little bit of cricket, they've
Mm,
probably been to a local 2020 game, and they won't
right.
really be aware of much beyond that.
Mm,
Um, that said, there are still, yeah, very much it's a weird one. Like you described the different kinds of cricket fan, and I think that's absolutely right and totally holds true in the UK as well. So there's the county championship fans who are, you know, a lot of them are of a certain age, and then there's the 2020 fans. And while these are all stereotypes, I think it does. There is a grain of truth to it, and there's certainly, you go to the different events, and the test crowd is maybe a little bit older and a bit politer, and yet there's a lot of beer being swilled. There are the beer snakes, and it's strange to see these different groups kind of happily rubbing up against each other.
Right. That's definitely something that you see in Australia as well. There's it's funny though, going to the test matches. I usually only go when I'm originally from India, so I usually go to the test matches every single day, as many tests as I can go to across Australia when it's India and Australia. And that's the perfect melting pot for a lot of beer, B, a lot of passion, but it also gets the crowds there. So it's riveting stuff. And every time I watch the Ashes on TV, especially in the UK, I think, oh, you know, these two series are the ones that I'm personally most involved in. So I think Test cricket is alive and well. And then I'd watch a Australia Pakistan or like a Sri Lanka England test match, and aside from the Barmy Army, which are amazing, there's not so much going on. But look, I think we'll learn a lot more about where cricket's headed in the next 12 months. But I did want to talk about yourself. So what you mentioned, you're a big rugby fan, you're a big cricketing fan. What is your favourite ever sporting moment?
It's the 2010-11 Ashes. So I went to the last two tests. It was 1-1 when I set off, and by the time I'd landed in Australia had been bowled out for 98. England was something like 160 without loss. It had already swung England's way, and then over the next 9 days of play, was it 2 innings wins? Can't quite remember. Anyway, it was huge. England won it 3-1. Yeah, players doing the sprinkler dance shows how long ago it was. On the outfield. So that was brilliant.
And if you could help one player or a team with a certain problem through your analytical skills, who would it be and why?
So in England's county championship, Gloucestershire and Northamptonshire were, to me, slightly surprising teams to have got promoted last year, and be really interesting to see how they get on, or would have got on in the 2020 championship. And because they're maybe slightly smaller, less fancied non-test playing counties or non-test hosting counties, I always root for the underdog. So, you know, anything anyone can do to give them the best chance, that's what I'd go for.
Yeah, nice. I think it's something that I noticed with a lot of my friends that are sort of diehard cricket fans that are into their test cricket. The theme of wanting to go for the underdog is quite prevalent. So it's funny you say that. Sure. Okay. Well, I guess to put it simply, you know, what about yourself? Like if you were looking to get a job full time in cricket analytics, what do you think would be the first step? What's available to you in the UK?
So it's interesting the number of diverse groups that have those analysts. So with the media, naturally, then with groups like the Crick Vises, and then the alternative would be through the county setup.
Right.
So
okay, fair enough.
Each county seems to have at least one analyst there.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
And then there's also, so there's one other bit. There's the academic route as well. So there's a few people out there with their doctorates in sport.
Right. Okay. It's interesting. Over the last month, I've basically been getting to. I guess I've always followed sport. You know, probably watch or sort of listen to podcasts about sport for a couple of hours a day, and 5-6 hours maybe on a weekend every day. But now that I'm focusing in a lot more on the corporate side of things or the commercial side of things, really getting to know what the industry looks like internally in Australia at least. But I think the main setback, obviously, with coronavirus is that unfortunately, I think the stat was roughly 80% of the AFL and Rugby League HQ admin staff and roughly 80% of the club staff are now being let go. So there's going to be a lot of change in the industry, and a lot of people, as you said before, that are going to have to find their next step in their careers. So it's going to be a really big 12 months essentially. Cool. Look, and last one really. I think we have briefly talked about this, but look, if someone is looking to get into cricket analytics as of now, with potentially 3 to 6 months of no sport on, what advice would you give for them to just get started?
What are the key bits? So one of the things that's been surprising to me is just how important the communication piece is. So I can do a fantastic piece of analysis, but if I don't word the tweet in the right way or make the headline on the blog post interesting and something somebody will want to read, it'll get no interest. Because let's face it, nobody has to read what I'm writing. It doesn't arrive on their doorstep each morning like a newspaper does. So it's kind of like, how do I get that message out there in an engaging way? So those communication skills, really important, perhaps as important as the analysis itself.
Right. Okay. And from a technical point of view, you mentioned you use Excel. So is it just a case of find the places where the data is stored, get it onto Excel, and would it be YouTube, or what would be the sort of best ways to just learn the basic principles to get started?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Because I suppose I come from a background of having picked up a load of skills along the way, rather
Right.
than picking up skills specifically to do some cricket analysis.
Yeah.
So I almost go to the other way. So I start with a question, with something that crops up, maybe I read about and think, I'd like to know more about that. And
Right.
then, so got the question that you're interested in, and then got to know the data that's available, and then try and work out a way that you can answer that question with what's freely available. As for what are the mathematical tools that one can use to do it, hard for me to advise on how you'd learn those tricks. I guess what I might be doing would be reading other bloggers and trying to pick up the way that they attack those questions.
Yeah.
Because like Cricinfo have got so much output of somebody answering a question using a bit of data along the way, and just sort of layering on the techniques that way.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Well, look, that was really, really interesting, Ed. So thanks for taking the time to chat with us, especially it's quite late in the UK.
Mate, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Oh, I've got one more thing actually, in terms of
Yeah.
like getting the data across, which is absolutely fundamental, which is the visualization. So it's the charts, the tables, like how you make a point in a very visual way, which, like, from a personal perspective, it's brought my skills on no end. Of like, if I have to distill this into a single graphic, and I do, how shall I present all this analysis that I just did?
Right. Yeah. I think I mentioned to you, professionally, I work in recruitment for data science and analytics, and I think I've seen the sort of, I speak to a lot of people that are, PhDs or sort of quite technical data scientists, and that's always a struggle for them to be able to visualize it, to essentially think about the user at all times. So I think the fact that you've picked that up, even in your own sporting analysis, is just a sign of the times, really. And it's apparently so much easier to do all the visualization work in the last couple of years. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, definitely. The tools out there are fantastic. Sites like Data Wrapper and even just as the various versions of Excel come along,
Yeah.
they come with a few more gizmos built in.
Awesome.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to check out more of our content, go to sporttechdaily.com or follow us on social media across Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram.